This video is powered by the pros at Pascal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPascal.com.
Mike DeCourcy is a national columnist for the Sporting News, covering college basketball, college football, NFL, soccer, all those other things. We appreciate your time, Mike. We've had him on halftime before. How you doing today?
I am doing very well, Phil. How are you?
Doing good. You got Matt Jones with you here, too. We have literally spent the last 2.5 hours talking Arkansas, Texas A&M, and what's moving forward for the Razorbacks, because it's a very frustrated fan base, and a game that nobody saw coming here. From the national perspective, when you see Arkansas is 2-3, 3 straight losses, 0-2 in the SEC, we're right here on the ground with it. From the national perspective, what's the viewpoint on Arkansas football right now?
Well, I think in some ways, after the start, the 2-0 start, I think there was started to be some optimism that there might be more in that than there's been. I mean, I know that neither team was elite that you started with, but Kent State from the MAC to handle them in the way they did, and I would say probably that a lot turned on how the BYU game came out. That if they win that, then perhaps what's happened since one doesn't happen, because everything happens, everything that follows. There's a chain of events that develop in any sport, and you lose one, and it affects how the next one goes. And I think that losing that BYU game, especially in the fashion that they did, really has had an impact. And then secondarily, whether or not Kent State and Western Carolina are great opponents, the defense performed, and it has not performed against a high major opponent yet. It has struggled in every outing, and until that gets squared away, and goodness gracious, I mean, what we've seen from Ole Miss, I mean, it's really going to be hard for that to turn around this weekend.
From the idea that usually by now we've zeroed in on like 3 or 4 teams that look like they are the real national contenders. I think it's difficult to zero in on some of those same teams. Georgia's got question marks. We don't know what to expect out of them. There's question marks about Alabama's offense. Texas has looked really, really good. Maybe both Michigan and Ohio State, or maybe Penn State out of the Big Ten. It's tough to zero in on some of the same teams that we've zeroed in on before, because truthfully, it's only Georgia and Michigan that are kind of up there right now, playing the same way that's expected. Ohio State too, but I'm not sure once they do go up against Michigan. Who do you view right now as the real national contenders?
Well, I think that you mentioned them. I think you have to throw SC in there. With Caleb Williams and them being able to take care of Colorado over the weekend. They let it get close, but they still won the game. I think that's one of the beauties of what is coming in college football. When I advocated for an expansion of the playoff, and I will be honest, I advocated just for 8, just to get it out of the rut of not having a bid to the tournament for every single team that wins a major conference. So I argued for 8, just give the 5, Power 5 at the time I'm arguing, there were Power 5, and then 1 for the group of 5, whoever the best is, and then 2 at larges. They go ahead and they go past that to 12, and a lot of people are like, well, it doesn't matter. It's going to be 55-1 in every game they play, and Georgia and Alabama, and you're seeing that that's not how sports work, and that in many ways that what was happening over the last decade was because of the playoff, the structure, that players who were elite said, well, if I want to play in that thing, I got to go to these 3-4 schools. If I go somewhere else, I'm never going to see it. And I think now players are starting to be dispersed more. I think some of this is name, image, and likeness and transfers as well, and it's spreading talent out. And it's great for the sport because everybody feels like they've got a chance. I mean, you mentioned a bunch of schools. I threw SC into there, and I think you have to. I think Penn State has to be taken seriously, although Drew Allers did not play well at all in the Northwestern game, and he's only 4 or 5 games into starting as a quarterback, probably going to have a clunker at some point. But if you're a Penn State fan, you worry, well, is that the real thing, or is that just no one was motivated to go to Northwestern and play in front of half a house after we just got done in a brutal game against Iowa. Who knows? But I think you have to throw them in there as well. The shame of it is that this grand field we're talking about right now, that we don't know how it's going to be. And we also should mention Florida State. I just remember that they haven't been brought up. This great field of 6, 8, 9 teams that maybe has a shot. We're going to have to see it taken down to 4 by the basis of a bunch of people's opinions, rather than this team won the Big Ten, this team won the SEC, this team won the Big 12. They all belong in it.
Mike, got a big one this weekend with 2 teams that are coming into the SEC. Oklahoma 5-0, kind of still under the radar. Nobody's talking about this 5-0 Oklahoma team. They're gonna play 5-0 Texas. What are your thoughts on that Red River rivalry?
Yeah, it's going to be a great last go around for them in the Big 12 for sure. Oklahoma, I got a chance to watch their whole game against Cincinnati. And I think offensively, there's still a lot to be resolved there. And I don't know, with the way Texas is playing right now, that they can keep pace. So their defense has to do a great job. Their defense has to make it. They have to make it a lower scoring game. Now, what's lower scoring in college football now? I guess anything under 30 for the winning side would be lower scoring. I don't see how Oklahoma gets to 30. In this game. I don't think they're ready to do that if they ever are going to get there. So for me, it's the defense for the Sooners have to keep it under 30, or it could be a real fun final romp in the Big 12 for the Longhorns.
Would you like to hit the reset button and go back to football? Well, I mean, not go back to, but not have some of these this realignment. The Pac-12. It's the irony of the Pac-12 being the joke of the Power Five for like the last 10, 11 years, and then maybe turning around and putting together what looks like the deepest conference, maybe even by far, here in the last year that they have oxygen, and you're talking about Texas and Oklahoma leaving. The Big 12 is going to, what is it, 16? We know all the changes happening in college football. There are times that I've watched for the last 3 or 4 weeks and thought to myself, I kind of wish we could. I wish that these changes moving forward aren't going to happen, because it didn't feel like college football was broken. And right. More than anything, it's like the networks went and they broke it to try to fix it.
Well, I think that, at the time, really what the genesis of this was not the networks. It was a particular booster at Texas who was mad that they stunk at football by their standards, and blaming the conference instead of the fact that they had done a really poor job over about a decade or so of administering their program. And that includes coach hiring and how you support the coach or don't that you do hire and all of that. And so they decided that it was the conference's fault that Texas wasn't as good at football as it should be. And that's when that all began. And they were the ones who, and basically when Texas says, we're up and out of here, Oklahoma, and hey, Oklahoma, if you want to come, you can come too. Oklahoma can't say no. They have to say yes. So I wrote a column on the day in July 2021 when this all started, and it still hadn't been consummated, that basically said that the commissioner of the SEC, Greg Sankey, who had recently made a statement that there wasn't any leadership in college sports, they said, okay, be the guy, be the leader. You're in a position to save all this, because if you say yes to this, you know what's coming. And everything that has happened since is a product of him taking that phone call from the 512 area code and saying yes. And if that doesn't happen, then if he says no, stay where you are, they probably stay where they are, and eventually Sark comes in there and starts to win games, and everybody settles down again. But when he said, no, we'll take it, and we're going to take all the money that comes with it and all of that, everything changed. And so that's why we are where we are now. And the Big Ten decided that there was money in the Hollywood Hills, and so they did theirs, and it's where we are. And of course, it still could have been closer to what it should be if the people in the Pac-12 hadn't, the presidents in the Pac-12 hadn't outrageously overvalued themselves, had accepted the money, the ESPN offered last autumn, and said, okay, we're good at, maybe they counter at 35 and see if they could get that out of ESPN. But they said, no, we're worth 50. And ESPN said, nah, we're not even going to take, that's it. That's the end of this negotiation. Let's go give the money to the Big 12. And that's the end of the Pac-12.
Mike, you have Kentucky that they ran all over Florida, kind of out-physicaled them. Georgia kind of had a tough one a little bit with Auburn. I mean, I never thought they were in doubt. Is there a chance that somebody, can beat this Georgia Bulldog team? Can Kentucky compete with them this Saturday?
Yeah, I think it helps, obviously, the Bulldogs to go home. I think Kentucky can play with them, but I think we've seen multiple teams compete with them. And when it happens multiple times, it's not one bad day. At that point, it's vulnerability. And that doesn't mean that a vulnerable team is always going to get beat. I covered a Penn State team in 1986 that had a lot of close calls and that ultimately won the national championship regardless, including beating Miami in a game that a lot of people thought that they would get blown out. Vinny Testaverde and Michael Irvin and a bunch of other great players.
It was like 5 interceptions, right? Yeah.
He had 5 interceptions that day, exactly. So every team that's vulnerable isn't going to get beaten, but every time they put themselves into one of those games is a chance. And I think it's a much different SEC this year than we've seen with either Alabama or Georgia dominating over the last several. This is a terrific Georgia team, don't get me wrong, and they certainly could still win the national championship, but it's not going to be 60-20 in the final as it was last year. They win it, it's going to be competitive. Either somewhere along the way or in that final game, they're going to have a couple of close calls here or there. SEC championship game somewhere on the road. They could. I don't have any doubt they're capable of winning it, but I do think that it's going to be a much more interesting November and early December for the SEC than maybe it's been for the last several years.
There's the thing about it that you hit on, the interest of it, the interesting games. And I think we view college football as this chalky sport where, you make your top 25 before the season starts, and quite often the top 4 are the ones that are playing for the national title at the end of it anyway. And this is not that season. This feels much more like like the NFL, maybe not in terms of things being a little upside down, but in terms of parity, in terms of there are many more teams that have the opportunity this year to play for the national championship, and it's not because it's a 12-team playoff. Like, that's the crazy thing about it. It feels like there's so many more teams that are that have what it takes to play for it, even though it's just 4 teams this year. And next year it all changes. Like, all this stuff about how much the regular season matters right now, it doesn't matter as much next year.
I disagree with that, and I'll tell you why. Because next year when they do, whether they settle on 5 or 6 automatic bids, the fact that I covered a Big Ten championship game. I think it was 2016. I might have the year wrong. But Penn State played, I think it was Wisconsin. They ended up winning the game. And that night, it didn't matter because it was nice to hold up the trophy. But in terms of winning a national championship, even though they were the Big Ten champions, it didn't matter. We'll never have that again after 2024 if they go to this plan and stick to it. That game will always matter. Who wins the league should matter, not who looks pretty, not who wins by a bunch of points, but rather who wins the biggest games, and that absolutely should matter. And so I'm excited about that. I think honestly the regular season is going to mean more. We've had tons of games in November, December over the last several years in every league that were that were compelling games between 2 quality teams, but in terms of the national championship meant nothing. Well, now they might mean getting a bid, or they might mean influencing the opportunity to win a conference championship, and then automatically get a bid. So I think that next year it's actually even going to be more fun than this.
BetOnline is your #1 source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. BetOnline continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting and your favorite casino and card games available to play right from your phone. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and get in on the action. Remember to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts.